Have you ever painted or sketched or drawn something or created anything really, and it turned out to be kind of a flop? Or at least it didn't match the image you had in your mind? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you something I created that I thought, this is not what I had in mind, and how I fixed it. Be sure to stay tuned to the end for my secret. So this is where I finished with this painting. When I looked at it, it's like, what is wrong with this? It just didn't achieve what I wanted. So two things went wrong now that I can look at it. One is, my goal is to draw looser paintings and like looser drawings, paint more loosely, not so tight and precise. But right from the start, I didn't sketch this with that kind of in mind. I actually defaulted back to too close to the real thing. And I used this as my reference photo. And you can see it has lots of like sharp, straight lines. And I wanted to make sure that things like this I got in the center here, everything lined up properly. But now I ask myself, well, why? Why did I need to do that? When it probably would be more interesting and more charming if I just loosened it up and just drawn without trying too hard. So when I started this, as you noticed right from the start, I had a pencil sketch I did. And it's basically a tight outline. And then I chose my colors to paint. And I thought, well, I want something a little bit different. I want pastel. But what happens with pastel is there's no contrast. This black is kind of too much for all this pale pastel. Also, by this time I was like, I want to loosen this up. So I didn't paint in this precisely, but it kind of is at odds with the precision of everything else. So what can I do with it? Well, one thing is add more contrast. So if I want to have, for example, this pale pink, why don't I paint this in black? So let's start with that. And this black I have is super black. So at first, the first time around, I went with this color here, which is another pastel. In fact, this whole set is just pastels. And because my aim, as I mentioned, is to just keep things a little bit looser, I'm not going to try and precisely stay in the lines. Partly because when it's this tiny to work with, it's trickier to do. And sometimes my hand just shakes a little bit, depending how much sleep I've had and who knows what. But I'm not still enough to make it really precise. So just as a starting place, I'm adding this. And should I do this? Maybe. But I'm going to do around the door first, all this part that's green, because I want that contrast to carry on throughout. And generally speaking, the interest in a painting or a drawing or whatever happens in the contrasts, because that's what draws us to it. So there, I think that right there makes this painting more interesting. I'm going to leave this one just because I don't want to overdo it. Now, one other thing I can do is take a note from the reference photo, which has these things are actually stone. So I'm going to just add some stones in here, or at least some marks that look like stones. And again, aiming for something a little bit looser. Now, do I have to do every stone? No, I do not. So I'm just going to tell the viewer's eyes that these little plinths, are they plinths? I can't remember, are actually stone. It's a nice architectural, I almost said archaeological. I guess it would be if you waited long enough. But it's a nice architectural feature. And another thing to think about too is the perspective on the side here. So if I'm looking at it from here, this angle is going to gradually reduce so that it's basically going the other way. Put a few little lines in here just to indicate the rest of the stones. See how effective that is? Suddenly the building is much more interesting. I should have started with this one because, as you can see, I'm right-handed and I have to get things out of my way. So the other thing that makes a subject interesting is often the detail. So if you have a home that's looking very plain and you want to basically make it look more attractive, you can add more details like stone on the front, brick, something where there's more visual activity. And visual activity is when there's lots to see. So if you're looking at this whole setup here, if I took everything away but this, that would reduce the visual activity. But there's lots of visual activity here because there's lots going on visually. So just adding that helps, doesn't it? Now, another thing I can do here is these stone steps. There's the risers, and then there's the flat part. I forget what that's called. The stair, I guess. And the stair is the skinny part. So I'm going to just darken those so that there's a little bit more contrast. Now this gray is quite light. I could put a little black in there if I wanted to, but I don't think I'll bother. However, I can go in, again, adding more detail and make some of these a little bit darker. Not all of them, just some. Like that. So suddenly I have more detail. Now, one other thing that is kind of bothering me about this is that these windows have they're just like blank. Now, modern windows a lot of times don't really have frames around them or anything, but I want to put a little bit of a frame around these just to give them more detail. And I'm not going to make them particularly neat because, like I said earlier, I want my work to be looser. For the reason is I find it more artistic in a way. Not that really precise drawings aren't great, because I love those as well, but just because the vision I have in my own mind is that it's looser and more charming. Okay, so this is a glass door. These are all glass pieces. Now I'm going to just add a little bit of something here to emphasize that there's reflection in these glass panels. I think that's probably enough. Okay, already it's so much better. Now another way to add interest is to add shadows, but I've got too much wet going on here right now. So instead I'm going to add more foliage. Now in the reference photo, which I changed to suit myself, see this has these pillars, which I didn't bother with. There's a little bit of a tree here, a little tree, and this is taken in the fall or winter when there are no leaves. But I didn't put that in because I didn't want that little thing in the front. However, and it's too late to put it in now because too much is going to show through from the back because of the nature of watercolor. So instead, I'm going to put a tree on the side, and I think I'll put it over here. This is going to be just kind of a small tree, and it's not winter in my little world here. I'm just going to do kind of an outline like this, and then I'll put the foliage on. Now, I could do it exactly the opposite, but I'm not going to. And over here, I want to put kind of a big bush. So for a bush, you don't need to draw the whole thing, and you certainly don't need to draw all the leaves, because a lot of the effect is achieved with the paint. So this might run a little bit because it's just barely dry, probably. And these Gansai paints are actually quite opaque. So I'm going to just pop in some color here. I'm going to run it up against the house. Just make it kind of loose and ethereal. I like ethereal. I like the word ethereal. Like from the ethers. And then we'll put this in here. Now, right off the bat, I'm like, okay. tree trunk isn't that color. Hardly ever, anyway. So I'm taking the paint back out as much as I can. It's pretty wet, so I can go like this and just soak it up. I want to put gray in there because gray is really closer to what a tree bark looks like. There, that adds something to the picture. And I'm also going to go over here where I've got some other greens. Let's see. These are my paints, and these little things pop out if you can get your fingernail behind them. So this is an olive green. There's also this darker green, which is a sap green. And I'm going to put a little bit of both in probably, but I'm going to start with this one. And just mix the greens. Because you know how trees, the foliage on trees is never it's never uniform throughout the whole tree world. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that. It's actually a bit too much water here. See how I just picked that up from over here and put it over here? There's another little trick you can use. And then I'm going to use this dark one because it's next to the house, but I want to run it together with the other ones because it's not going to be a solid line. I'll put that up against the house. And I think I might as well put a little bit in here too because there's going to be shadows and darker areas. And here it ran, so I might as well fix that. Darken it up a little bit on some of these other ones. There. Now I can ask myself, has that worked to make the painting more interesting? And the answer is absolutely. I think it's much more interesting. What I look for is, I like the sort of charming cottage look. I mean, it doesn't work for everything, obviously, but I want it to look inviting so that you'd come up to the door and go, I love this house, I want to see the inside. And wait, I have another quick idea here. I'm going to put some more sort of bush around the bottom of this side here. In this olivey green, because this tree looks like it's kind of standing out in the middle of nowhere. This paint is almost like a gouache, so you can actually just use less water, and it's almost opaque. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Just move a couple of things and hope that I don't make anything crash. I'm just going to grab this one and watch what happens when I just pick up a lot of paint here. So it's more paint, less water. For one thing, you can see on the brush it looks quite opaque, but I can come over here and put it over top of something and it covers up completely. So it acts almost like a gouache. What happens though when it dries is, depending how thick it is, you might need to add another coat. But it's very handy that way because you can use it, like most gouache, you can use it as a gouache, which is opaque, or a watercolor. Just wanted to see if these are the same, but they came in different sets. I got this set separately from the big one, but it doesn't matter because they make like hundreds of colors and they're not inexpensive. So if you're interested, watch for sales, because I got my big set on sale for, I think it was $35 Canadian, down from like 100 or something. Anyway, anything else I could do here? Sure there is. I'm going to put a little sky on here. To do that, I want a bigger brush, because I'm just going to put some water around here because I'm going to basically hint at sky. And I think I might as well use this. It's kind of a periwinkle blue. And notice how I'm not going near that black because I don't want to pick it up. And then I can take my brush and just with water and pull it out like that. Now I'm going to turn this around because again I'm right-handed, and do the same thing over here. And this makes it sort of fade to nothing. I'm just doing little parts at a time because the paper's going to absorb the water, and then what? And then you can't make it flow. So suddenly my boring little house is now quite an interesting little house. That went from being an uptight little house to quite a loose little house, and now I love it because it's actually reflecting the image I had in my mind of a really cute house. If I wanted to make it even cuter, I could put a chimney on it, but this is all wet, so I won't bother. And as I promised, here's my secret. If you don't like what you're painting, keep painting till it looks good. If it just is hopeless, leave it, come back to it. If it's acrylic or gouache or anything else that's opaque, oil, you can paint over it, but watercolor is really hard to paint over because it'll wet what's behind and, you know, just get worse. But you can paint over watercolor with gouache and cover up your mistakes. So there you go. Keep painting till it looks good. Have a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.